Scene that seems to be repeated throughout the city. One of our producers last night was walking through the Grand Central Terminal to catch a train, and all of a sudden he saw that thousands of his colleagues and fellow New Yorkers started to clap, and he looked around him, and as he turned over his right shoulder, he noticed that there were 10 firefighters who had walked into the terminal, and I guess the applause grew louder and louder as people realized they were there, and at one point one of the firefighters doffed his helmet to the crowd as they exited the terminal to the echoing applause. And you know, Jill's story, unfortunately, is being repeated throughout this city, but the one thing that has hit a completely raw nerve here is the loss of at least more than 300 firefighters, and we are told now maybe as many as 100 police officers. And the city is doing what it can to honor those that continue to assist in this horrible, horrible effort.
Indeed, Paula. Speaking of that, there are more than 1,000 people at Ground Zero attempting rescue and salvage efforts, continuing with some hope that perhaps some survivors might be found beneath the rubble. It was a difficult night, to say the least. Already, of course, an incredibly difficult challenge, but the weather did not cooperate. A series of electrical storms came through New York overnight, forcing those workers to cease and desist for a little while. CNN's Martin Savage has been monitoring the situation there. He joins us from Lower Manhattan. Martin?
Morning to you, Miles. We are in the area of Reed and Greenwich Street. For those who are outside of New York and aren't familiar with the area, we are about 2 blocks away from Ground Zero. It would be in the background here, just down this street here. The important thing at the moment is the volunteers. This is basically shift change that is taking place. The night shift coming off, the day shift beginning to go in. 2 workers who have been working through the night, working through this bad weather that they've been having, are Helen Nolan and Lou Ferraro, and they join us this morning. Good morning to both of you. What has been going on overnight, Helen?
Not very much with the weather. They've been using the heavy equipment, and the firemen couldn't go in really and sift through the rubble, but they're trying to do their best to get, you know, to the towers to see where the people, maybe survivors or remains, but not very much last night because of the weather. So,
Lou, has there been any sign, anything you know of regarding survivors?
Actually, they kept us back as the ironworkers were working because they were working with the heavy equipment. We've heard rumors of people hearing knocking and such things as that, but from where we were, we don't know. And we've gotten to a point by hand that the only way the next level is the heavy equipment. So, you know, it's very frustrating standing there waiting to go back in when you can't. So.
You were describing to us the use of buckets and how instead of the heavy equipment that's going in now, it was almost work by hand. How did that go?
We followed the fire department's lead. Everything was behind the fire department. They knew what they were doing. We would make a chain in and out of piles, whichever area we were supposed to work. One line of people for buckets going in, and then they would fill them up with rubble, debris, whatever, and another line going out into a pile. Then they would pick it up into a truck and take it away. They were trying to do as little small pieces as possible to see what they were picking up. They had to look at every little thing, but as fast as possible. Until, like I said, they had to get the heavy equipment in, at which time they moved us out.
Helen, you're an emergency medical technician by training. You work for the city. You've obviously seen bad things. How does it compare to what you see now?
This is like nothing I've ever thought I actually would see. There's no words to describe it. I just, you know, my heart goes out to the families. I have to say the Red Cross and the volunteers are doing a great job. They have food there all night. The firemen are exhausted and they're continuously working. The police department, everybody. I mean, everybody is just doing a magnificent job. And even New Yorkers themselves are going out of their way to be nice. I mean, they're waving and, you know, thanking people on their way home and applauding, and it's just, it's great. But definitely shock and disbelief. I mean, I never thought I'd see anything like this, you know, ever.
You've been working straight through since Tuesday.
Yeah.
You go home now and you have your own family. What will you do?
I'll hug my son when I go in the door, and to be honest, I don't really know. It's just, it's very difficult to readjust to your own family life, you know. I mean, after seeing the carnage down here, it's just, it's very difficult to do. So, call my family in Ireland more than anything, but so.
Lou, what do you normally do when you're not here, obviously?
I run my own business. I sell beverages. That's what got me down here. I donated a couple of pallets of water, and I asked if I could help a couple of days ago, and they were looking for all the help, they could possibly get. So I've stayed. I'm going to go home. Like, I have 3 children, spend the day with them, sleep a little bit, and come back at like 3 o'clock and do it all over again.
Why did you feel that you had to go beyond donating to actually getting in there?
Something told me I had to be here. I'm sure with the amount of people that are lost, it's people I know, and even if not, I mean, it's unbelievable. I was just talking to a gentleman, a police officer from Utah. They've been driving 38 hours straight, Chicago, all over the country. Everybody needs to be here. It's for all of us. It's for my kids, and that's why I'm here.
Lou, Helen, thank you very much. Thank you for your work as well. There are officers and volunteers that have come from all over. We were just through a checkpoint.
All right, that was CNN's Martin Savage in Lower Manhattan. We apologize for the problems with audio and the technical issues there, but we have inclement weather, which is bedeviling the technology this morning. Moving on this morning, where are we headed? All right. Meanwhile, the investigation of the crimes is hitting full stride, and here in the U.S. and around the world. Our national correspondent, Eileen O'Connor, joining us from Washington with the latest on that aspect of this story. Eileen.
Well, Miles, it is very important that the investigators try to find out who the people who were involved in that, because they do believe that they perhaps have not caught all of the people, or that all of the people involved were not, of course, killed as the hijackers, and there could be still other people out there with other plans. And what we know is at least 8 people were arrested and detained for questioning at 2 New York airports yesterday. 4 of those people had tried to board a flight on Tuesday and were confronted and quickly left because of a watch list that's been distributed to airport personnel. Now, these same people were picked up when they came again yesterday. They had open tickets. One of the total group picked up had false identification as a pilot. And the investigation, as you said, is in full swing all across the country, with federal authorities searching homes and hotels where they believe the people involved in the plot may have stayed over the last week. That includes areas in Virginia, also in Maine, and as well as Newark and in Florida. One person that is being seen increasingly as a linchpin in all of this, where a lot of connections are going through, is Mohammed Atta. He was listed on American Flight 11, according to federal law enforcement sources. That was a flight from New York to Los Angeles. And that was the one that went into the first World Trade Center tower. He and another associate, Marwan Al-Shari, attended 2 different flight schools in Florida. A third man, possibly a cousin of Al-Shari, named Waleed Al-Shari, was listed as well on Flight 11, according to official documents from New York. Now, this is the first plane that flew into the World Trade Center, as I've said. Now, that cousin also attended a flight school, a different flight school in Florida. Federal law enforcement sources say that they traced their track all the way back to Hamburg. Yesterday, we had several arrests in Hamburg. German authorities say that they know that Mohammed Atta used to live in Hamburg with Marwan Al-Shari and a third individual, and that they were associated with a terror group. One of the people arrested in Hamburg yesterday was an airport worker. German authorities say they are still looking for others that may have been associated with this group. And again, police are on the lookout. Law enforcement authorities, airport workers have been given a list of names to watch out for. Miles?
I mean, first of all, do investigators have the sense that there were perhaps some thwarted efforts on Tuesday to perhaps hijack other planes and engage in attacks on other targets?
Absolutely, they do. And as you know, some precautions have been made. Defense Secretary Rumsfeld says that they have fighter planes on alert to go into the sky if they do detect any kind of unusual movement of any planes that subsequently do take off. Those New York airports, were open just very briefly, and once these people were detained, they closed down very quickly. National, as well, in Washington, still remains closed. and we're starting to hear some reports of incidents perhaps in other airports across the country. Also, you know, there is the security measure that was taken by the White House in putting the Vice President, Dick Cheney, up at the Camp David. It's very clear that federal authorities are being very cautious in the reopening of these airports, and that they do believe perhaps that there are other members of this group, other members associated with this plot, that still could be out there and still could be planning other things. Miles?
Given the number of suspects, the number of locations, initially it might strike one as kind of odd that intelligence personnel didn't have some indication this might have been brewing, but I suppose it is possible that each of these distinct units didn't know about the others.
Absolutely, and federal law enforcement sources tell me that they are increasingly working under the assumption that many of these groups did not know each other, that there was some signals that, some overt signals that would happen on the aircraft. You know, one of the things, Miles, that's so important about getting those flight data recorders isn't just about what happened on the plane. It's also what the hijackers might have said about other plans. As you know, we heard that was reported an air traffic control conversation on that flight that crashed in Pennsylvania. The microphone was left open. We heard that one of the hijackers was heard to say that they had other planes and they had other targets. Federal law enforcement very interested in talking to all those people that had cell phone conversations with families. Also looking at these flight data recorders. They want to know, did the hijackers talk about any other targets, about any other groups, any other airports that those groups might have been working out of? Miles?
All right, CNN's Eileen O'Connor reporting to Washington from us. Those cockpit voice recorders will, of course, be key as they sift through the rubble trying to find that information. What will be interesting to see is if these hijackers, who admittedly, apparently, were very sophisticated, were able to disable those cockpit voice recorders. That information will be crucial. Hopefully there'll be something on those tapes. Now, the White House and Congress have cut a deal to provide $40 billion in emergency aid to help New York and Virginia recover from Tuesday's attacks. On Capitol Hill this morning, CNN's Kate Snow with more on that. Kate?
Good morning, Miles. Congress today expects to vote on this emergency spending bill. Late last night, the Speaker of the House was meeting with Mitch Daniels, the economic advisor from the White House, and also the two senators from New York, trying to work out some of the language of this $40 billion bill. The White House, according to sources, wanted unfettered access to all of that money so they could spend it as they see fit. Some on Capitol Hill are a little concerned about that. They want more control over this money. But the bottom line is, yes, it will be for $40 billion.
We'll vote today or early this morning to appropriate this emergency supplemental. It's essentially $40 billion, $10 billion to be used for intelligence and defense purposes, $10 additional billion which will be used at the discretion of the president, who will have 15 days in which to submit to Congress his list of requirements, and then $20 billion to what you would call local aid to New York, Virginia, and Pennsylvania to cover their costs as it relates to the domestic expenses, public safety, humanitarian, the search and rescue missions that we are watching the images of on CNN all day.
Now, ironically, much of the detail of this language and this bill was worked out on the east lawn of the Capitol yesterday. You see here members evacuating the Capitol. This happened last evening as negotiations had been going on about the budget and about this emergency spending bill. The Capitol evacuated for about 15 minutes. There was a suspicious package that had been found on the Senate side of the building. It was a false alarm. After the evacuation, the members were allowed to go back inside, and they just had a chance, though, to talk while they were outside here on the lawn. And at that point, we're told that they were talking about these figures. They were talking about the $40 billion. And Miles, just to give you a little perspective on how much money we're talking about here, on Tuesday, before the attacks ever occurred, the House was set to take up a measure regarding defense spending. This is what they were going to do on Tuesday. And there was $18 billion in that bill that the president wanted to spend on defense that everyone was arguing about. They were very concerned. There were some Democrats who said it would break the budget. Miles, that's $18 billion they were arguing about. Now they're going to spend twice that much in one day, and that's just an initial figure to get some help and some relief. Miles.
As Minority Leader Dick Gephardt said yesterday, this is not the time to talk about the budget, but eventually the bills are going to have to be paid. When will the day of reckoning occur, Kate?
All we can tell you, Miles, is not yet. I've talked to a lot of members about this, and they keep saying, look, right now we're unified. Right now we're working on matters of absolute urgency. Down the road, we can worry about the accounting. Miles.
CNN's Kate Snow on Capitol Hill. Thank you very much. If you have a question for CNN, we invite you to head to our website. It is located at CNN.com.